Hello and welcome to our New Year's Eve special. We break into our regular programming to bid goodbye to the year 2022 and welcome in the new year. Coming to you live from Seoul, I'm Kim Mo-gyan.
And I'm Kim Do-yeon. We're just an hour away from saying goodbye to 2022 and ushering in the new year. It's usually a time for us to reflect on the past 12 months and set new goals for the upcoming year. So tonight, we take a look back at the major stories that dominated the headlines in and out of Korea and what to look out for in 2023.
That's right, Toyeon. 2022 has truly been a busy year for South Korea with ups and downs both on the domestic and global front. We've witnessed several historic milestones this year, from the start of the Yoon Suk-yeol administration to the success of the Nuri rocket launch, and even South Korea's national football team reaching the round of 16 at the Qatar World Cup.
We will break down on these events sector by sector in this special edition. Hope you stay tuned until the very end.
So let's start off by connecting to our reporters, Choi Min-jung and Kim Hyun-sung, who are at major New Year's Eve celebration sites in the country. Min-jung, you're at one of the most crowded places during New Year's Eve, the Bosingak Pavilion.
We could already see many people who gathered over there fighting the cold weather. Min-jung, tell us how it's looking over there.
Hi guys, we're just about an hour away from the highlight of tonight's event, which is the bell ringing ceremony. And this place is currently packed with people. As officials say, around 100,000 people have gathered here tonight to celebrate New Year's. As you mentioned, the bell ringing ceremony is an annual tradition in South Korea, but it's taking place in person for the first time in 3 years due to the pandemic. As it's such a long-awaited event, we're seeing a lot of excitement from the crowd. Let's take a listen.
Very excited for it.
Definitely, and keen to see some Korean traditions. I feel like that's
and learn more
nice.
about the history and the culture. I'm very excited.
Yeah.
Now, Min-jung, for our viewers who aren't so familiar with the event, what's the significance of this annual bell ringing ceremony, and is anything special scheduled especially for tonight?
Well, the big bell will ring 33 times at midnight to wish prosperity and peace for the nation and the people. It will be rung by 14 participants, including 4 government officials and 10 citizen representatives. And they include South Korea's World Cup superstar Cho Kyu-sung, artist-actress Jung Eun-hae, an honorary ambassador of Seoul, and comedian Kim Tae-gyun. This bell ringing ceremony holds a very special meaning in South Korea. The tradition dates all the way back to the 14th century Joseon dynasty, when it was struck to signal the end of the night curfew and the start of the new day back then. Plus, tonight will also be a night full of performances. There will be music concerts of Korean traditional music kugak, as well as performances of popra, a combination of pop and opera. I'm sure people will have an exciting night, but attendees should know that safety comes first. To prevent overcrowding, the ceremony is simultaneously taking place at Bosingak, Gwanghwamun Square, and the Dongdaemun Design Plaza, which have huge screens set up for people to enjoy online. And around 1,000 safety personnel have been dispatched as well. For those still wanting to come out to enjoy, it will probably be best to leave your car behind because cars are restricted in parts of Jongno-gu district. But public transportation will operate until 2 a.m. Back to you guys.
Well, thank you for that, Min-jung. Now let's cross over to our Kim Hyun-sung, who's at the southern port city of Busan, where the New Year's Eve festivities are ongoing. Hyun-sung, we're more than 300 kilometers apart, but just by looking at this screen, I can feel the excitement brewing in Busan from the studio.
Absolutely, Doyeon. What a happy occasion. Hopefully our viewers can feel the excitement as well, no matter where they are in the world. There's no more mask mandates outdoors, but I saw a lot of people still wearing masks. Like Min-jung mentioned earlier, this is the 3rd year since the COVID-19 outbreak, but it's the first time that New Year's celebrations have come back in full swing without the social distancing or strict COVID measures. And it's just great to usher in the new year with a resounding welcome.
So Hyun-sung, it seems like you're near the beach over there in Busan. What kind of New Year's Eve festivities are taking place over there?
Right, so I'm at Gwanganli Beach, and supposedly there's going to be the largest drone show in Korea close to midnight. So around 1,500 drones are going to be decorating the skyline for a countdown. And when that clock strikes midnight, there's going to be a special show. What I've heard is like they're going to draw a rabbit in the sky to celebrate the zodiac animal of next year. I'm not really sure what to expect, but from the sound of it, everybody seems to have their expectations way up for the midnight drone show. There's nothing quite like it, and you might also be able to hear this behind me, but there's also a concert going on right now. Singers Ali and Kim Dong-hyun and more have come to perform and celebrate the new year with us.
Well, it all sounds exciting. Where else in Busan are people celebrating the New Year's?
Well, Toyun, it seems like this whole metropolitan city is in full cheer. There's a New Year's festival going on at Haeundae Beach right now. They're also holding a concert since 11 p.m. There's going to be a midnight bell tolling event at Yongjusan Park. But they're not the only places. There are more than a dozen places, major tourist spots that are holding New Year festivities, and local authorities are expecting around 60,000 or more people in total for these areas. And that is quite a big crowd, so they're taking the necessary precautions to keep everyone safe by deploying hundreds of police officers for crowd control, and they'll likely have to work through the night because there's also going to be a sunrise event at Busan Beach at the break of dawn, and I'll be here to witness all of that. So I'll talk to you soon in the new year.
All right, Yeon-sing, thank you so much for your report. Talk to you again later.
국민이 진정한 주인인 나라, 국제사회에서 책임을 다하고 존경받는 나라를 위대한 국민 여러분과 함께 반드시 만들어 나가겠습니다. 감사합니다.
발표는 이런 강제 기술 능력과 안정화를 위해 무엇보다 중요하다는 것과는 별도로
On the count of three.
한미일 공조는 보편적 가치를 수호하고 한반도와 동북아의 평화 안정을 이루기 위한 강력한 보루입니다.
2022, first and foremost for South Koreans, will be remembered as a year when a new leader took office. As soon as he was inaugurated in May, Yoon Suk-yeol embarked on a mission to gain international support for his presidency.
Now, for a summary of the Yoon administration's diplomatic achievements this year, we are joined by our North Korea correspondent, Han Sung-woo, here in the studio with us. Welcome, Sung-woo.
Happy to be here, Mogyun. And my goodness, where do I start? Back in March, former Prosecutor General Yoon Suk-yeol, in the tightest presidential race in South Korean history, narrowly edged out his liberal rival Lee Jae-myung to take the mantle as the nation's new leader. And right away in May, as he promised, he opened the Blue House to the public and moved the presidential office to the Defense Ministry compound, signaling the start of the Yongsan era.
Now, if there's one thing we know for sure about Yoon Suk-yeol, Sung-woo, it's the faith that he holds in the South Korea-U.S. alliance, which he's made even stronger, hasn't he?
That's true, Doyeon. Not long after Yoon's inauguration, there was a bilateral summit with U.S. President Joe Biden. Biden reaffirmed the United States' extended deterrence commitment to South Korea, using the full range of American defense capabilities, while leaving the door open for dialogue with North Korea. The allies also vowed to take their technology partnership to a new level to secure resilient global supply chains of key industries, including semiconductors, electric vehicle batteries, artificial intelligence, and biotech. That alliance was reaffirmed the following month in Madrid, where Yoon made his international debut, becoming the first South Korean leader to attend a NATO summit. There, he had a trilateral summit with Biden and Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, who all agreed that North Korea's nuclear ambitions posed severe threats to East Asia and beyond. A message that was echoed in New York during Yoon's first one-on-one with Kishida in September on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. There, the two also discussed the need to resolve pending issues, likely in reference to Japan's wartime crimes complicating bilateral ties.
Right. So speaking about bilateral relations, we cannot leave out, of course, China. How has South Korea under President Yoon Suk-yeol been positioning itself on its relations with China?
Well, Mogan, the main reason the U.S. is trying to galvanize its allies in the Indo-Pacific through various partnerships is to contain Chinese expansion. Now, what does that mean for South Korea? It means the Yoon administration must tread carefully to keep both superpowers close. The U.S. as its ironclad military ally and China as its biggest trading partner, with whom the country celebrated 30 years of diplomatic relations this year. The difficult dynamic was on display in November when Yoon met with the Chinese leader on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Bali, Indonesia. The South Korean president requested China play a more constructive role in addressing North Korea's nuclear threats. She replied by saying China hopes Seoul can actively improve inter-Korean relations, adding that Beijing would support Seoul's so-called audacious initiative, should North Korea respond to it positively.
Well, let's hope that all is well in the international arena ahead. Excellent wrap-up, Sung-woo. Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
The year 2022 was a tough year when it comes to South Korea's foreign policy, with North Korea's unprecedented number of missile launches and Russia's invasion of Ukraine disrupting the stability in East Asia. Now let's connect with experts from around the world to wrap up 2022 and look into what the region can expect in 2023. We actually have 4 renowned scholars joining us today. From the U.S., we have Dr. Soo Kim from RAND Corporation. Professor He Bao-gang from Deakin University joins us for insights on China. Professor Sasada, who teaches Japanese politics at Hokkaido University, also joins us. And last but not least, Professor Robert English from USC joins us for his thoughts on Russia. You're joining from all over the world. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Well,
thanks for having me.
Yeah, so Dr. Kim, I wanted to start with you. As I've mentioned, North Korea has launched an unprecedented number of missile provocations this year, threatening security around the Korean Peninsula. The Iraq-U.S. alliance has been strengthened, but there is no progress in U.S.-North Korea relations. How do you view the current situation on the Korean Peninsula?
So as you mentioned, it's a very tough time, I think, for all parties involved, with the exception of North Korea, I would say. North Korea has been making grand strides in its weapons capabilities. I think just in the past week or so, we've seen North Korea march forward with spy satellites, with the high-thrust solid fuel engine that's been tested, just to show to the South Koreans, the United States, as well as to Japan, that the effort to stop North Korea or to deter the Kim regime from proceeding forward will not be taken passively. And I think the latest statement from the North Koreans also indicates that.
Okay, now, Professor Ho, this year marks the 30th anniversary of diplomatic ties between South Korea and China. However, Seoul is walking the thin line between the U.S. and China while the two countries have a push and pull with each other. With the possibility of a South Korea-China summit being held in Korea, what are the chances of President Xi actually coming to South Korea? And how do you evaluate the current Seoul-Beijing relationship?
Yeah, I think it is likely for President Xi visit Seoul in the first half of next year. This is a state visit. State visit, Beijing need a lot of time to do a solid preparation. And normally always use such an occasion to sign a big deal. So it's need a lot coordinations behind the door. And one of the issues currently going on is should President Xi visit Seoul first, or should President Yu visit Beijing first? So a middle power is always concerned with the status, equality, and dignity in diplomatic relations. But a great power like China, sometimes they have a problem. They have what they call the great power autism. They are not sensitive enough to the request from middle or small power. I hope both sides can manage this sequence issue well and do not allow it to become a major obstacle for the state visitor in the next years.
Right. Now, Professor Sada, the leaders of South Korea and Japan have been hopeful for a better relationship going forward, even mentioning a possible summit. Where are we when it comes to advances in improving bilateral ties, especially with the new administration this year?
Yeah, there's no doubt that the diplomatic relationship between the two countries is in worse condition since the end of World War II. So the recent development is an important first step for improvement. So that's where we are at, taking the very first step from the bottom, so to speak. However, we have many difficulties lie ahead, particularly the seemingly lack of trust between the two countries is making it extremely difficult for the leaders to cooperate in any meaningful way. From the Japanese perspective, it is difficult to make any commitment with an anticipation that Korean policy towards Japan may change drastically should there be a power shift in South Korea in the next presidential election. Also, the rise of nationalism in both countries is making it harder for the leaders to make concessions, which are important in making the diplomatic relationship better.
So, Professor English, it's now been 10 months since Russia invaded Ukraine. With this, the international order has been shaken up, and many say that Russia may have a stronger influence over North Korea now than it did before. What do you make of this?
You know, I think it's more reciprocal than that. It's not just one-way influence. Both sides are benefiting almost as if this were a business negotiation, right? They are finding mutual benefit in these new circumstances of the Ukraine war. Russia has apparently purchased large quantities of artillery shells and missiles, according to U.S. intelligence, from North Korea. These are supplies that Putin desperately needs, and it's also good business for Kim. Apparently, they also have a deal for a significant number of North Korean guest workers to come to Ukraine, occupied eastern Ukraine, when reconstruction begins at some future point. This would be the Donetsk and the Luhansk territories, whose annexation by Russia, North Korea is one of only a handful of countries to recognize. And in return for this diplomatic support, Russia, along with China, is blocking new sanctions on North Korea for its provocative missile tests. So it's a reciprocal exchange, a two-way relationship right now.
Now, staying on the war in Ukraine, Dr. Kim, has the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula been pushed down the priority list for U.S. since Russia's invasion of Ukraine?
I think this is, I mean, it's not surprising that we are looking at it this way, because as time has passed, and we clearly know that North Koreans have been developing and really just flaunting the rapid advancements that they've been making in their weapons program, we haven't really been able to stop the behavior. And I would agree with my panelists in that the North Korea-Russia relationship, they have been benefiting tremendously from each other and from the circumstances. So it's not surprising that from either South Korea, Japan, or even North Korea's perspective, we do get the impression that the United States might be deprioritizing the DPRK issue. But hopefully that is not the case. I think hopefully the Biden administration is playing, just like North Korea, the longer game in terms of trying to get a better hold of the Kim Jong-un regime's nuclear ambitions, as well as its tendency to be belligerent vis-a-vis South Korea, vis-a-vis Tokyo, and of course vis-a-vis the United States.
Professor Ho, the U.S. has been calling on China to play a bigger role in containing Pyongyang's provocations in the region, as well as possible nuclear tests, and obviously hasn't worked yet. What is China's stance on this? When will Beijing step in and take part in keeping peace in the region?
Thank you. To answer this question, I think we must take a big picture of the geopolitics, with different countries having a different calculation. The increased WMD threat from North Korea has increased pressure on South Korea to move closer to the United States, while still being reluctant to annihilate Beijing. At the same time, I think it's important we need to link this North Korea issue to the Taiwan issue. So China's stand on this North Korea nuclear test issue depends on U.S. policy towards Taiwan. Washington seems to be currently does not take North Korea nuclear issue as a priority and make the Taiwan issue as a new priority. If the United States has taken Taiwan issue to contain China, so China will use the North Korea issue to confront Washington. Thus, the Beijing is unlikely to play the active role to persuade Pyongyang stop the nuclear test.
I want to move on to issues in 2023 going forward. Professor English, this is a million-dollar question, right? How do you see the war in Ukraine unfolding at this point, and what will be the situation on the Korean Peninsula due to the next stages of the war?
I see more of the same, at least for the next 4 to 6 months. I know that's a depressing thought, but Russia is regrouping. Ukraine has bogged down. The winter is difficult. And there are no signs from either Zelensky in Kiev or Putin in Moscow of changing their goals. And from the point of view of Russia and also China, I think they like this, right? Because they see that as the war drags on, the costs to the West are growing, the divisions in the European Union are sharpening, new divisions and strains between the United States and its Western allies are intensifying. And all of that is to the benefit of the West's rivals. So as the cost continues to grow, as there's no clear end in sight, I think that Putin in Moscow in particular sees that he can hang in there politically longer, even though his economy is battered by sanctions, that he can hang in there longer, and he's going to wait and see how this difficult, long, and really winter of privation will impact Western solidarity. Consequently, that's my answer. More of the same for several months. And what does that mean for the Korean Peninsula? More of the same. Continued Russian support for North Korea, continued cooperation between the two, as Russia seems to be embracing a kind of rogue state status, which puts it together with North Korea. Putin seems comfortable with that, so that's what we'll see more of.
Right. Now, speaking of the Russian support of North Korea, Professor Sasada, with the veto powers of Russia and China, the UN Security Council couldn't fully utilize sanctions on North Korea. That said, Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo have decided to go with independent sanctions. How important is it for the three countries to work together to deal with Pyongyang in the upcoming year?
Well, I cannot stress enough how important it is, given the fact that the UN Security Council is currently dysfunctional, as you have rightly pointed out. However, there are many obstacles in the trilateral cooperation. The lack of trust between Japan and South Korea, as I mentioned earlier, is one of it. Another is the fact that the United States is preoccupied with so many other issues, including the war in Ukraine, China's advance in Indo-Pacific, the growing insecurity in the Middle East, just to name a few. So the United States has limited time and resources to handle the North Korean issue. Yet their cooperation is the only viable option available at this moment. So it is essential for the three countries to build an environment in which three countries can work together effectively and hopefully expand this international framework to other like-minded countries like Britain, France, Germany, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand.
Now, staying on the topic, Dr. Kim, while the said trilateral relationship has been getting tighter, relations with the three countries and China and Russia have not made much improvement. How can the involved countries shorten the distance between one another?
It's a really tough situation, I would say. I do agree with Professor Sasada in that Washington, Seoul, and Tokyo, as much as we're all trying to cooperate, there is some distance that cannot be ignored amongst the countries. And I think this is where North Korea, China, and Russia are profiting from these gaps. And the longer these gaps remain unaddressed, and it'll just create more opportunities for Pyongyang to take advantage of the seams. So the one way, I think, the only way for the three parties to limit distance from each other and also to weaken North Korea's leverage is to strengthen the cooperation and really think about which issues are actually worth debating and holding contention over, because I think those are ways where we are sort of wasting time, I would say, while the North Korea threat continues to grow. And it's not just the North Korea threat that we're worried about. It's also the war with Ukraine, the U.S.-China competition, and so many other issues that are really preventing us from moving forward and addressing some of the long-term challenges that I would say all three countries are facing these days.
Thank you so much for joining us. And I know I can sit with you individually and spend hours, but that's all the time we have for this time around. I hope you have a great new year in 2023.
Happy New Year for 2023. Make sure you listen as often as you can and send in messages. You can win prizes from time to time. There's nothing to lose. Let's all have a brilliant 12 months to come. Bye-bye.
Thank you everyone for the love and support this year. Hope you guys stay safe, stay warm, and have a happy new year. Keep an eye on us. Thank you. Happy New Year. Happy New Year. Love you.
What a year it's been, guys. Happy New Year. It's now 2023, and I want to thank you guys for tuning in for the past year, showing endless support and love for me and the program and all of our staff and guests. And I hope you guys will join me for the new year as well. Wishing you happiness and health always. Love you guys. Thank you.
And don't forget to stay tuned to Simply K-Pop and me, MC Terry, next year as well. Thank you. Happy New Year, everyone.
Hopefully next year we get a chance to see a lot more of you come to see our programs. We've got a lot of great lineups of artists, interviews, and a lot more, so see you there. I would like to wish everybody a Happy New Year. Happy New Year!
What up, everyone? This is Aaron. Alan,
Taeyong
from After School Club. Wow. Guys, I just want to say you guys did a great job last year.
Thank you.
Seriously.
Thank you. Right back at you.
Thank you very much. We also want to give a huge thank you to all of our viewers and listeners around the world. Without you guys, none of this would be possible. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And do you have any plans for the new year? Whatever they are, we hope that all came true.
Yes, and don't forget to watch After School Club in the new year as well. And as always, we'll be waiting for you. Last but not least, to our Arirang TV viewers, Happy New Year! Woo!
저희들은 이번 금리를 통해서 부동산 가격이 어느 정도 조정되고 가계부채 증가율도 조정되는 것이 고통스러운 면이 있어서 참 죄송한 마음이 들기도 합니다만 거시 전체로 봐서는 안정에 기여하는 면도 있다고 생각합니다.
And now we turn to the economic front with a wrap-up of South Korea's economy this year. High consumer prices, interest rate hikes, and exchange rates have been the country's economic keywords for 2022.
That's right. And for more on how our economy fared over the past year, our business correspondent Lee Dae-yeon is with us in the studio. Welcome, Dae-yeon.
Good evening.
Dae-yeon, so consumer prices have skyrocketed over the past year, causing concern for many people. Now, explain for us first, how did inflation impact the grocery prices for 2022?
Right, Woo-gyun, 2022 has been a tough year in terms of the economy and especially consumer prices. So consumer inflation in South Korea has risen to a level not seen in almost 24 years in July. The Consumer Price Index, a key gauge of inflation, in July stood at 108.74, up 6.3% compared to the same period a year earlier. After that peak, prices started to fall, but the on-year price change remained at 5%, much higher than the central bank's 2% target. There are many factors causing higher consumer prices, but one of them is global oil prices. The ongoing war in Ukraine is one of the reasons, as Russia is the biggest country for petroleum exports. Plus, rising crop prices are also affecting consumer prices. The war in Ukraine has aggravated tensions in the agricultural commodities market as disruptions to exports from the Black Sea region and high prices further destabilize food security globally. In fact, global wheat prices jumped 60%, while corn increased 30% on year in 2022. The central bank expects the inflation rate to remain in the 5% range until early next year, and it forecasts consumer prices to drop as the economy slows.
Right, so consumer inflation saw its peak in July this year, but has been starting to fall since then. And this soaring inflation has also affected interest rates, which has been another hot topic this year.
That's correct, Doyan. To fight inflation, the country has chosen to raise the key interest rate for a record 6th consecutive time this year. And for the first time, the Bank of Korea raised the base rate by 50 basis points twice, once in July and another in October. And especially by raising 50 basis points in October, the key interest rate has reached 3% for the first time in 10 years. This decision came after the weakness of the Korean won. The won had lost more than 15% of its value against the dollar in September this year. The bank is also moving up interest rates to keep pace with the U.S. Federal Reserve, which raised its interest rate by 75 basis points in September. But considering the recent exchange rates, it's becoming more stable. In the expectation that the U.S. Federal Reserve will raise rates at a slower pace, the government decided to increase the rate by a smaller margin last month of 25 basis points. With the latest hike, the country's benchmark rate now stands at 3.25%. Meanwhile, experts forecast South Korea will continue to raise interest rates throughout the first quarter of next year by 25 basis points to 3.5%. Now, eyes are on whether the key rate will come down next year or remain at its peak for a while.
Right, so we'll have to keep a close eye on what direction will consumer prices and interest rate will go in the coming year. But thank you so much for your wrap up on the economic front this year, Daehan.
Thank you and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
We've come to the end of the year 2022, and looking back, there have been numerous incidents that gripped the world over, some that dealt big blows to the global economy. But the problem is, some of these issues still haven't been ironed out for next year. There are dark clouds that will hang over the world economy in 2023. There's the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine, and the results of China's COVID-19 policy, and a possible colossal debt crisis. So what should policymakers do to navigate a soft landing for next year? Tonight, we have an analysis of the ups and downs that shook the global economy before looking ahead to 2023. And for this, we are joined by guests from around the globe. We are joined by Jeremy Zook, Director of Sovereign Ratings at Fitch Ratings in Hong Kong. And we're also joined by John Parlusen, head of the OECD Korea desk in Norway and in the United States, and Dr. Randall Jones, Distinguished Fellow at Korea Economic Institute of America. Welcome to you all to the show. So first, let's start with Mr. Parlusen. Wrapping up the year 2022, how would you evaluate the global economic performance of this year?
Well, we entered the year with strong momentum in 2021, but already saw signs of strained supply chains, and we had the beginning of an energy crisis in Europe. Then we had this huge economic shock, which came with Russia's illegal war of aggression against Ukraine. And it spread across the world from Europe through global energy markets. And of course, we cannot forget China's zero COVID policy and crackdown on housing developers. So these supply shocks to inflation were also boosted by high demand and very tight labor market in many countries, catching up from the pandemic and fueled by fiscal policy. Despite this, the world actually did surprisingly well in the first half of the year, but we are seeing more and more signs that the economy has turned and entered very difficult waters with, for example, car sales falling, retail sales and industrial production leveling off, and consumer confidence falling through the floor in many countries. And next year will no doubt be very challenging.
Right. And what about Dr. Jones? How would you rate now South Korea's performance for this year? And what do you think is the biggest threat for South Korea's economy for the coming year?
Well, I think in 2022, we had growth of about 2.7%. Based on strong growth in the first half of the year. We lost some momentum in the third quarter, partly because of the global slowdown that John mentioned that reduced demand for Korean exports. And semiconductors, of course, accounting for 1/5 of Korean exports, there was weak demand. We also had private consumption was hit by high inflation in Korea, and that reduced household spending power. And that also led to a drop in consumer confidence, as happened in many other countries. Then we also had these higher interest rates as the Bank of Korea tried to anchor inflation expectations. And higher interest rates, of course, put a bigger burden on the highly indebted household sector and also create a risk of a correction in housing prices. So we have all these threats and negative trends. At the same time, I feel confident that Korea's expansion that started really with the pandemic downturn in 2020 I think this expansion will continue into 2023 despite all these problems.
Well, that's something positive to hear. Now let's bring in Mr. Zook to the conversation as well. Fitch has maintained South Korea's credit rating to be AA-. How would you evaluate Seoul's fiscal and external soundness?
Yeah, we affirmed Korea's AA- rating and kept a stable outlook on the rating in September. And, we expect Korea's rating to remain relatively resilient to some of the global headwinds that have just been mentioned. I think, a few factors support that. First of all, Korea does still have, despite the near-term slowdown, a rather dynamic industrial and export sector that does provide relatively strong medium-term growth prospects. And then there are those fiscal and external finance buffers that you just mentioned. And we think those give Korea a good ability to manage some of the challenges that it will be facing. First of all, when we look at government debt ratios, they have risen quite sharply during the pandemic, as they have everywhere. But Korea is still right in line with most of its AA peers when it comes to that debt ratio. And we've now seen the government put forward plans of keeping lower deficits and trying to rein in the increase in the debt ratio. So that will continue to be a supporting factor. And on the external side, again, even though we've seen a bit of weakness more recently, Korea has very strong external finances. It's a net external creditor. It has had persistent current account surpluses, and still it has very large foreign exchange reserve buffers that will help it manage some of these risks.
Now, having these factors in mind, Dr. Jones, the South Korean government has laid out various fiscal policies over the past year, from interest rate hikes to, cutting real estate taxes. How would you evaluate such measures from the government?
Well, I think we're seeing both tightening on fiscal policy and a tightening of monetary policy. And in my view, both are appropriate. As you know, the Bank of Korea has been raising interest rates since August of 2021. They went from 0.5% up to 3%. And I think the Bank of Korea was correct in starting the monetary tightening relatively early, because as we know, the Fed did not start until March of 2022, and the European Central Bank didn't start till July. So I think the Bank of Korea has responded well, but there'll have to be more interest rate hikes because core inflation, which excludes food and energy, is still nearly 5%. So I think we still see some monetary tightening in the months ahead. On fiscal policy, as Jeremy mentioned, we have a fiscal rule that's been tightened, and the government plans to keep the deficit no more than 3% of GDP, excluding Social Security. And so in line with that target, the budget for next year will cut the deficit from about 5.2% down to 2.6%. So the government shifting away from large-scale support for households and businesses hurt by the pandemic, and more targeted support for people who are hurt by the higher energy prices. So I think the trend in both monetary and fiscal policy is correct.
Mm-hmm. Now let's move on to the economic growth forecast. Mr. Park Yu-sun, the OECD recently lowered its economic growth forecast for South Korea next year from 2.2% to 1.8%. What's behind the drop?
Well, there are two main factors behind our revision, and in a way, both are beyond Korea's control. First, global demand for Korean exports is weakening. Semiconductors is the most prominent example. This industry was a major growth engine pulling Korea out of the COVID crisis, but the cycles has turned and declining sales will weigh on exports. And the second factor is household consumption. And this is, of course, because high inflation and increasing interest rates are eating away people's incomes and pouring a bucket of ice also on the housing market. And these factors are set to weigh on business and housing investments going forward. And finally, as mentioned earlier here, we see fiscal policy being less forthcoming. So we do not expect a growth rebound before late next year or early 2024.
Now, what about for Fitch? In its latest report, Fitch forecasts South Korea's growth for next year to be at 1.2%, and this is also down from the initial 1.9%. Mr. Zook, what's the reason behind this, and do you think this could have some room for changes?
Yeah, we did undertake a rather large downward revision to our growth forecast for 2023 in our December outlook. The key reason behind this, and I'm sure I'll be reiterating a number of points that have already been made, is really the external demand story. It's a story of high inflation and rising interest rates. And all of these, we think, will be quite significant headwinds for Korea's economy. The biggest downward revision was for our outlook for exports. We've already seen exports come off quite sharply. Again, this is, as mentioned, due to the largely due to the down cycle in the semiconductor sector. And we expect that will persist for much of the next year. At Fitch, we're forecasting modest recessions in Europe and the U.S. next year, and that will be a drag on Korea's export sector. Also, China remains quite an uncertain story. We're seeing quite a dramatic shift in their COVID policy, and so a lot of uncertainty around our forecasts for China. But certainly a near-term volatility will be added to Korea's export outlook, but perhaps a stronger rebound in the second half of the year. From a domestic demand point of view, as has already been mentioned, Korean households have rather high household debt levels, and 80% of mortgages are on a floating rate basis, and so all of these rapid rate hikes by the Bank of Korea will feed through to households' balance sheets, or household incomes and spending power quite quickly, and we think that will be a drag on growth. The balance of risks, I would say, is a bit more even given our large downgrade to the growth forecast. As I mentioned, there's just a lot of uncertainty in the global outlook, but I would say relatively balanced given our 1.2% forecast.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned household debt and drop in exports and the inflation situation. Now, given such risks, Dr. Jones, what do you think should the South Korean government focus on doing in order to, manage its economic risks?
Korea looks quite strong in terms of the level of debt and level of foreign exchange reserves. So I'm mainly concerned more about the long-term fiscal risks associated with very rapid population aging. Korea will have exceptionally rapid aging, and that will put upward pressure on spending, especially on social welfare for public pensions and long-term care and health care. I worked on Japan for many years at the OECD, and I think some of the lessons are applicable. Japan in 1991 had a social spending by the government about 11% GDP, and it doubled by 2015 as the population aged quickly. Well, Korea is in the same situation as Japan in 1991. Public social spending is about 11% GDP, but we forecast that it'll be up to 23% by 2060. So the key is to finance this big increase in spending due to aging and avoid the run-up in debt that Japan has had. Japan went from 60% debt to GDP in 1991 up to 250%. So it's crucial that Korea meet its commitment to the elderly while trying to raise efficient revenue and increasing the efficiency of spending programs to avoid a fiscal crisis.
Mm-hmm. Now, we have a lot more questions prepared, but I'm afraid we'll have to go out with our last one. Mr. Parlusen, the OECD has stressed that the importance of pension reform in order to stabilize debts and fiscal soundness is crucial. Can you explain for us why is this so?
Yeah. Well, I would like to turn the question around, because the old age poverty rate in Korea is the highest in the OECD, and most importantly, we recommend pension reform to secure that all people have decent incomes and living standards. But of course, pensions need to be financed, and there's now a parliamentary group looking at the broad pension reform, and we do not want to be very prescriptive in exactly how this group should achieve it. But such a reform should secure decent pensions, it should secure incentives to work and save, and expenses should be, of course, balanced by income over time. So So to achieve this, people will need to contribute longer by increasing the pension age and the contribution periods in a way that reflects life expectancy, and you will likely need to raise pension contributions as well, because these are very low currently in OECD comparison. But these large, broad pension reforms, they take a long time to plan and implement. So in the short term, perhaps you need a more short-term fix to lower old age poverty. And a way to do this could be to target the basic pension by giving larger payments, but limit them to those pensioners with the actual lowest incomes.
Right. So I'm afraid we'll have to wrap up our discussion at this point, but thank you so much for making time for us tonight and for your insights, gentlemen. We appreciate it so much.
오징어 게임의 세상 속으로 오신 참가자 여러분 환영합니다. 456억 원을 상금으로 드리겠습니다. 그럼 첫 번째 게임을 시작하도록 하겠습니다.
제 이름은 똑바로 읽어도 거꾸로 읽어도 우영우입니다. 기러기 토마토 스위스 인도인 별똥별 우영우.
그렇게 말하지 마라.
Wow, what a year it has been for the Korean wave. K-dramas had the world hooked and K-pop topped numerous charts around the globe.
Right, and now to talk more about South Korea's accomplishments in culture, arts, and sports, we are joined by our very own Lee Si-hoo, who has covered such stories throughout the year. Welcome, Shi-hoo.
Great to be here.
So Si-hoo, now as we saw in the video, many South Korean dramas and films were recognized in the global level for, compelling stories and mesmerizing acting performances. First, can you remind us about these accomplishments?
That's right, Mo-kyun. We saw the power of K-content spreading out across the world this year, and that was especially true in films and dramas. As we saw, the hit drama series Squid Game won not one, not two, but 6 awards at the prestigious Primetime Emmy Awards in September. The drama was nominated for a total of 14 awards. Among those, it won awards for Outstanding Directing by director Hwang Dong-hyuk and Outstanding Lead Actor by actor Lee Jung-jae. Squid Game actor Oh Young-soo also made history by becoming the first Korean actor to win a Golden Globe Award. He won Best Supporting Actor in a series at the Golden Globes. Now, another South Korean film director, Park Chan-wook, was recognized at the Cannes Film Festival in May. He won the Best Director for his film Decision to Leave. Also at Cannes, actor Song Kang-ho won the award for Best Actor for his performance in the film Broker.
And of course, we can't forget K-pop when talking about K-content. In fact, BTS, Blackpink, and Stray Kids all reached the #1 spot on the Billboard 200 this year. How else have K-pop artists swept the world?
Yes, many K-pop artists have taken strides in their music and careers this year, but just to name a few, the girl group Blackpink released its second studio album titled Born Pink and performed at stadiums and arenas in Korea, the US, and Europe as part of a world tour. The group also made history, being named Time Magazine's Entertainer of the Year, and they appeared on the cover of Rolling Stone magazine. As for BTS, its member Jungkook wowed the audience at the World Cup by performing at the opening ceremony in Qatar. He sang the official World Cup soundtrack, Dreamers, which topped charts around the globe.
Right, and it wasn't only K-pop that touched the hearts of people around the globe. Shihu, what other milestones have we reached in the past year?
Well, in June, South Korea's Im Yoon-chan became the world's youngest person ever to win gold at the renowned Van Cliburn International Piano Competition at just 18 years old. At his final performance of the competition, one critic said a star had emerged before our eyes. The video of the final performance trended globally on YouTube in the days after. In literature, illustrator Susie Lee won the prestigious Hans Christian Andersen Award, sometimes called the Nobel Prize for Children's Literature. Lee won the award for lifetime achievement in illustration after 21 years dedicated to painting children's books.
Now, and last but not least, South Korea saw great success in sports, as well as starting with the Winter Olympics.
Yes, at the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics, South Korea won both in men and women's short track. Hwang Dae-hun and Choi Min-jung both won gold in the 1,500 meters. South Korea also took 5 silvers and 2 bronzes in Beijing. Meanwhile, footballer Son Heung-min won the Premier League's Golden Boot in May, becoming the first Asian footballer to win the title. And South Korea's national football team, led by Captain Son Heung-min himself, reached the World Cup round of 16 for the first time in 12 years, to the country's joy.
Right, it was indeed a year full of achievements all around. Let's look forward to more strides in 2023. Thank you for the wrap-up, Shihu.
Thank you.
Now, the last minutes of 2022 is winding down, and that means we're minutes away from the bell ringing ceremony to open 2023. You will be able to see the invited special guests who will be ringing this significant bell for this year. 10 select people, plus the Seoul City officials like the mayor and education superintendent, will have the privilege to take turns to participate in a years-long tradition of ringing the bell 33 times.
And of course, Seoul City Mayor Oh Se-hun will also be taking part in the bell ringing ceremony. The list of people usually includes those that showed outstanding performances in their respective areas. Now, one face that most people would be able to recognize is Cho Kyu-sung, South Korean national football team's forward. He's shined for the national team earlier in December during the 2022 Qatar World Cup, scoring 2 goals against Ghana. And also, he currently plays for the local club named Jeonbuk Hyundai Motors.
Right, and as we mentioned, the bell will be rung 33 times. 33 is a special number in Buddhism. And back in the day during Joseon Dynasty, the bell was rung at 4 a.m. daily to alarm the end of the night, signaling the start of the day and opening city gates. Now, it's rung only a couple of times a year, and as you can see, there are thousands of people gathered to see the bell be rung for 33 times, and it's only rung on Liberation Day and like August 15th and the National Foundation Day.
Right, Toya. Now we're seeing some coverage of on-site. People are waiting for the countdown. I think it has begun. Let's also join in the countdown, Toya. 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year!
We can hear the bell ringing now.
Right. The bell has been rung. With that first ring, the year of 2023 has officially begun. So,
right, and in the case of New Year's Eve, those individuals are the people that are rewarded for their work throughout the year are here to ring the bell together. People will be able to see what kind of year South Korea had when looking at those people that's participating. Like you mentioned, Cho Kyu-sung, who was outstanding at the World Cup, right?
Of course, who can forget the 2 goals he scored for Ghana? Now, this helped South Korea also reach the knockout stages at the World Cup for the first time since 2010. But in terms of who else is there, we are not kind of seeing more footage on that front. But we also know that Jung Eun-hae is there.
Right. I mean, she is famous for her role in one of the year's most popular dramas, Our Blues. You will be able to see her soon. They're taking turns, 6 people at a time. But talking back about her, is she has Down syndrome but has worked hard to become a recognized caricature painter. Now she's loved by people in Korea and fans across the world for her role in the show.
Right. I'm seeing also a popular comedian, Kim Tae-gyun, there also ringing the bell together. And also, apart from that, also in the entertainment sector, there's also a firefighter, Kim Jun-kyung, from the Gangnam Fire Station, who's part of the 10 people who's chosen to ring the bell. Now we're seeing also Seoul City Mayor Oh Se-hun at the front ringing the bell.
Right, and I just wanted to mention that as we talked about, we can kind of see what kind of year that South Korea had for 2022. And the firefighter Kim Jun-kyung is a perfect example, right? Like we had dozens of people that have been affected, that have died during a natural disaster, and firefighters like him have had to endure the hardships.
Right. The year 2022 was filled with also happiness, but also sorrow for many in many aspects. Now, we are still seeing footage of the Bosingak pavilions. Thousands of people are waving their hands over there, saying, greeting the Happy New Year. Doyeon, did you have any did you have any news that has impacted you for the year 2022?
Well, certainly it was Itaewon Crowd Crush. As we were anchoring both night and day, our reporters were out there reporting there. And that's why the safety issue is so important. And as you saw, there are thousands of people gathered there. And we have just rung in 2023 at Bosingak Pavilion in Central Seoul, marking a fresh start to a new year, hopefully moving past the hardships that we endured during 2022. But to celebrate, let's check back to our reporters who are at the two biggest cities in the country. First to Minjung, who's at Bosingak, like we just were seeing. Minjung, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, guys. We have just struck midnight and the bell behind me is still ringing as I'm speaking. Everyone here is just full of excitement. They're chanting, cheering, hugging, and clapping. And it's currently packed with people as officials say more than 100,000 people have gathered here tonight to celebrate New Year's. It's particularly more meaningful this year because it's taking place in person for the first time in 3 years due to the pandemic. As it was such a long-awaited event, we are definitely seeing a lot of excitement from the crowd. Let's take a listen.
Very excited for it.
Definitely, and keen to see some Korean traditions. I feel like that's
and learn more
nice.
about the history and the culture. I'm very excited.
Yeah, I'm very excited. This is actually the first time I've been away from family for New Year's, so I think that it'll be a really cool experience being here, seeing all the festivities, and especially since COVID was such a big thing, now we're all free to celebrate this together. It's really cool.
Right. And Minjung, for our viewers who aren't so familiar with the event, what's the significance of this annual bell ringing ceremony? And is there anything special scheduled for tonight?
Well, the big bell rings 33 times at midnight to wish peace and prosperity for the nation and the people. And right now it's being rung by 14 participants, including 4 government officials and 10 citizen representatives. They include South Korea's World Cup superstar Cho Kyu-sung, artist-actress Jung Eun-hae, and honorary ambassador of Seoul and comedian Kim Tae-gyun. This bell ringing ceremony holds a very special meaning in South Korea. The tradition dates all the way back to the 14th century Joseon dynasty when it was struck to signal the end of the night curfew and the start of the new day back then. Plus, tonight is a night full of performances. There are music concerts of Korean traditional music, gugak, as well as performances of popra, a combination of pop and opera. I'm sure people will have an exciting night, but attendees should know that safety always comes first. To prevent overcrowding, the ceremony is simultaneously taking place at Bosingak, Gwanghwamun Square, and the Dongdaemun Design Plaza, which have huge screens set up for people to enjoy online. And around 1,000 safety personnel is dispatched as well. People should also know that cars are restricted in parts of Dongno-gu district until 1:30 a.m., but public transportation will operate until 2 a.m. That's all from me, and I wish a Happy New Year to everyone watching.
Right, Happy New Year to Minjung. Now let's turn to our reporter Kim Yeon-sing, who's standing by at Busan Gwanghwamun Beach, where the New Year festivities are also ongoing. Happy New Year, Yeon-sing.
Happy New Year to you too and to our viewers all around the world. Hopefully this is a year where you live your best life.
Right, Yeon-sung, it looks
sorry,
like...
Mogyun, I think I'm having a little bit I'm having a little bit trouble hearing you because the sound is so loud right now. There's a special show going on behind me, and I'm so sorry that you missed it, but there was a special drone show in the sky. Fireworks are going off when the clock struck midnight. There's a countdown with drones writing up the numbers in the sky. 1,500 drones were glitzing up the Gwanghwane's skyline, and it was the country's largest drone show yet, and it was quite a bedazzling spectacle. I really hope our viewers could see it, but I'm sorry I was the only one to enjoy it here.
Right, but there must be a lot of people there. We can see that.
Yes, absolutely. There's a really big crowd flocking behind me, which is why it's a little bit difficult to hear you right now. A lot of people are in cheer. Right now, after the midnight countdown, they're leaving. This is a really special occasion because it's the first time in 3 years that New Year celebrations have come back in full swing. Take a listen to what some of the people here had to say.
약간 마스크 없어서 조금 많이 편하게 지낼 수 있어서 좀 많이 편해진 것 같아요.
So I didn't celebrate the last Happy New Year. So this time I want to celebrate here because I think it's a best memory last year. I want to show it out here.
Seems like the whole metropolitan city is in cheer. Haeundae Beach is also celebrating New Year's. Yeongdusang Park is celebrating New Year's with a bell tolling event. And more than a dozen tourist spots are holding New Year festivities. And local authorities are expecting around 60,000 or more people total in these areas. So it is quite a big crowd, and local authorities are taking the necessary precautions to keep everyone safe by deploying hundreds of police officers to busy areas for crowd control. And these police authorities who are at the site may be also working some extra hours because now coming up is the first sunrise of the year, and there's also going to be a special sunrise viewing event at Haeundae Beach, and I'll be there to witness the first sunrise and make some New Year wishes. So happy New Year to you guys. Back to you, Mogyun and Toyeon.
Right, Yeon-sung, we're so excited for you to be there and enjoy the festivities. Happy New Year, guys, and I'll see you back in the office in 2023. Well.
So now that we've reined in the new year, what's most important is how wisely we would spend the next 12 months.
Right, Mogyun, and to help us make our lives easier, the government has also announced a bunch of changes that would take effect from as early as today. Our Kwon So-ah gives us a rundown on what kind of changes await us in the new year from our new virtual reality studio.
Hello everyone, this is Kwon So-ah coming to you from Arirang TV's virtual reality studio, featuring the newest VR technology available today. And from our studio here, I will introduce to you 5 major changes that we're about to witness here in Korea in 2023. So without further ado, here they are. Say goodbye to the Korean age. The first major change is the revision to Korea's age counting system. The second change is a new rule on the labeling of expiry dates. Next, we have a number of changes in the country's transportation and traffic systems, and an increase in the minimum wage. The last is the ban on checkered patterns for school uniforms. Let's go into more detail on each of these changes and how they might transform the look of our daily lives. 2023 will be remembered as the year we didn't get older. Korea's age counting system will be modified to meet international standards. Starting in June, age will be determined according to one's birth date, meaning the age of newborns in Korea will start at 0 and they will become 1 year old 365 days after, on their birthday. This is what Koreans up to now have referred to as the man age. In the Korean age system, the most widely used out of 3 methods that exist in the country, Koreans are 1 year old already at birth, and another year is added when the calendar flips to the next year. That meant a baby born on December 31st would be 2 years old just the day after. With the new system, besides making people feel a little younger, the government's aim is to minimize confusion when processing official documentation and legal affairs, as well as welfare, medical, and administrative services where age is an important factor. Have you ever wondered until when that milk that's been sitting on your fridge for a while is exactly safe enough to drink? Some of you might think, well, not on the expiry date. And you're right, as the date we used to see on food packages for the past decades represents the sell-by date. However, starting on January 1st, the labeling on your food product will tell you when it is safe to actually consume the product. The new system is therefore expected to clear up any confusion among consumers and will give producers a bigger time window to sell their products, hopefully resulting in less food waste. And that could save the country tens of millions of dollars and help the environment as well. According to the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety's analysis, the new system will extend the shelf life of tofu by 36%, bread by 53%, and juice by 75%. But an extension for some temperature-sensitive items, like milk, has been postponed for now. Get ready for safer conditions on the road and more affordable public transit. Right turn signals will be installed on traffic lights nationwide starting at the end of January. These signals could help to better enforce the new traffic rules that were implemented in 2022 that require vehicles to make a complete stop at intersections before making a right turn in a bid to better protect pedestrians. If you are a motorcyclist in Korea, you might want to sign up for insurance if you haven't yet, because all motorcyclists will be required by law to have an insurance plan starting this year. In the event of an accident while driving an uninsured motorcycle, drivers will not only be liable for any losses and damages that occur, but will also have to pay a fine for non-insurance. Good news for public transportation users. As early as in June, a new commuter pass will be introduced that can be used on subways and buses alike and allow commuters to save up to 40% on their fares for 60 trips over 30 days. Taking effect on January 1st, the minimum wage will be set at 9,621 per hour. That's up 5% or 461 from the 2022 minimum wage of 9,161. When factoring in 209 working hours per month, that translates to a monthly income of more than 2 million won, the first time that minimum wage earners in Korea will ever enjoy such a figure. However, a 5% increase is more or less the same as the previous year's rise of 5.1%, with workers complaining that it's barely keeping up with inflation. No more checkered patterns. School uniforms will undergo a design change this year. And no, it's got nothing to do with the latest fashion trends. While checkered patterns were widely used in many Korean school uniforms, a certain luxury brand wasn't pleased about this. It's none other than Burberry, the British fashion house, which had complained for years that some middle and high school uniforms in Korea were violating Burberry's trademark rights and won a related lawsuit in 2022. Therefore, some 200 schools in Korea will be adopting new designs starting with the new school year. And those are 5 of the major changes you can expect to see in Korea in 2023. Arirang TV will also go through an evolution of its own this year, bringing you new programs and content while making further use of this virtual studio as well. So you can look forward to a year of excitement and abundance in 2023. This has been Kwon So-wa.
So as you just saw, there will be a lot of changes coming in the new year, and Arirang News as well will have some changes of its own.
That's right. Starting January, we will have a fresh new lineup of anchors to lead our news team, and that includes both New Day and News Center programs.
So we wanted to take this opportunity to introduce our new anchors, Kim Da-mi and Yoon Jung-min, who will be taking over. Welcome to the show, guys.
Great to be here.
First, Dami, you will be hosting New Day starting January. How do you plan on approaching this new role?
Well, I've never been this excited to wake up before the sunrise. I'm looking forward to delivering what our viewers need to know first thing in the morning and also before their bedtime for those on the other side of the world.
Any particular areas of interest that you have?
Well, for the past 2 years, I was a foreign affairs and North Korean affairs correspondent. My wish to cover and report from North Korea has not come true yet, unfortunately, but I'm excited to take on the new role. I'm also a huge fan of BTS and ARMY myself. I'm excited to tell our viewers about cultural beats and pieces at our new day.
One last before we let you go.
Well, I've been on and off behind the anchor desk on weekends, but never as a regular anchor. I do realize the new duty comes with a whole lot of responsibilities, but I'll do my best to bring you quality news together with my colleagues, of course, at Arirang Newsroom.
And we also have our Yoon Jung-min, who'll be anchoring evening news from January. Jung-min, tell us about your past year.
Sure, Mogyun. So it has been a busy year since the start of a new administration. There has been presidential election, the transition period, and the start of a new administration. I mostly covered the top office in 2022, and I also went through a transition as well, switching to covering politics from foreign affairs.
Right, Jung-min, can you tell us more about your past experience as a presidential office correspondent?
It has served as a great opportunity to get a first-hand look at what's happening at the top office and hear more stories from sources as part of the presidential press corps. I learned a lot, and I'm looking forward to contributing more to our newsroom with my experience and knowledge.
Right. Do you have any words on how you want to pursue your new role?
Sure, Morgan. So I'm looking forward to meeting viewers on Arirang News every weekday, 6 p.m. Korea time. Our news team will bring our viewers up-to-date, in-depth news from Korea, politics, economy, K-pop, you name it. We will keep you posted on what's happening not only here in Korea, but around the world and what it means for you. So do not miss it.
Now, they're not the only new anchors that will lead our news team in 2023 or other newscasts. Throughout the day, we will have new faces.
That's right. We have a total of 5 live newscasts and special programs focusing on in-depth interviews as well. Let's take a listen to what our new hosts and presenters have to say.
It's always busy and hectic here. There are so many meetings, briefings, and seminars to follow every single day. And the stories here are constantly changing and developing. But I think that's what makes working at the National Assembly challenging yet interesting, because I always need to stay alert and stay open-minded so that I don't draw any early conclusions. And I also try to keep on top of things and, most importantly, try to find the full facts of the story. And I think these traits could help me be a little better at delivering the news in the most up-to-date and accurate way.
A new type of news. We aim to make that, specifically for people in their 20s and 30s. We will deliver the up-to-date news to this new generation. News Generation.
엄지영, Arirang News. Hi, I'm Ji-young, and I'll be anchoring Arirang News daily at 9 p.m. here in South Korea. I've been out in the field mostly covering important topics in business and economy. With this experience, I want to help our viewers worldwide feel like they're getting the most recent news in an easy-to-understand way from a reliable news outlet. I'll do my best to deliver the most up-to-date news with our news team. We look forward to making Arirang your go-to newscast.
Politics, the economy, foreign policy, North Korea, and culture. Knowing what is happening in the world is one thing, but what matters is knowing why such events are taking place around us, from their background to what impact they'll bring. Within the Frame will provide analysis with leading experts for you to better understand the world and Korea. Tune in to Within the Frame with me, Kim Bo-kyung, after Arirang's main news program.
All right, we'll be looking forward to their contributions in the new year. Now, speaking of new faces, beginning March, new talented reporters have joined our news center too. They've already been showing great presence by contributing to our daily news segments throughout the year 2022.
That's right, and so expectations are high for their future endeavors in the new year. Let's take a listen to what ambitions our new field reporters have in plan for 2023.
Welcome to Arirang Newsroom.
We're the rookies of 2022.
Year 2022 for me was filled with opportunities. As a reporter, I talked with some K-pop stars and went to exciting events in Korea that I didn't even know existed. I talked with hundreds of people and heard their stories.
From exciting culture events to tourist spots, I'll continue to bring you all the fun stuff here in Korea. And what's more fun than a K-pop dance challenge? 아, 진짜 못하겠어요.
2022 has meant a lot to me. I joined Team Arirang and could meet and talk to a number of CEOs and other leaders from promising firms who make South Korea a leading global business hub.
In 2023, as a news feature reporter, I will keep our viewers up to date with major developments across all fields, especially science and technologies. Please follow the latest with me.
"2022 was a tough year for the economy, both at home and around the world. However, over the last 9 months, I've seen enough to suggest that there is hope for economic recovery through innovation."
With growing fears of a recession next year, in 2023, as a business correspondent, I want to be bringing more in-depth coverage of economic and consumer trends and what impact they might have on daily life.
And I feel like Gucci. I feel like Gucci. Yeah, I feel like Gucci, baby. I feel like Gucci. I feel like Gucci, baby.
저기. 잠시만요. 다 주실게요. 잠시만요.
May 2023 be filled with exciting news. We will bring an updates and improved version of ourselves.
Please look forward to seeing more of us on Arirang News.
We're Arirang Rookies. Happy New Year!
Arirang Now is resonating with you through visions. Resonating with you through communication. Resonating with you through culture. Resonating with you through laughter. Resonating with you through music. Arirang will continue to show the value of resonating with the world in 2023. Resonating with the world, Arirang.
Well, that brings an end to our New Year's special. 2022 was certainly an eventful year filled with diplomatic and economic hurdles for the global community, but hopefully we can hear more positive news in the year of the Black Rabbit.
That's right, and we also hope 2023 will be a happy and healthy year for all of our viewers across the globe. From every single one of us here at Arirang, we wish you a happy, prosperous, and blissful New Year.
Oh, and don't forget to tune in every day to Arirang TV for your daily dose of Korean and global news updates. Happy New Year again, everyone.
다 잘 됐으면 좋겠죠. 다 건강하고 돈도 많이 벌고 그랬으면 좋겠죠.
이 일이 좋아서 계속 하고 싶거든요. 그래서 내년에도 또 건강관리 관련해서 좀 잘해서 내년에도 좀 문제없이 한 해가 쭉 갔으면 좋겠습니다.
I hope that it stays as is and doesn't get worse. I heard the masks might come off eventually, so hopefully that happens.
제가 운동 선수인데 복싱을 하거든요. 그래서 이번에 국가대표 선발을 목표로 하고 있었는데 이번에 떨어져서 솔직히 내년엔 될 것 같아요.
내년이 속토끼라니까 흑토끼들 화이팅!
내년은 이제 저희가 전공을 들어가서 이제 전공 더 열심히 공부하면서 더 열심히 더 놀아야죠 이제.
그냥 운동을 하고 있어가지고 헬스를 하는데 지금 거의 한 달에 한 번 가고 있어요. 좀 많이 갔으면 좋겠습니다.
동아리 같은 거나 대외 활동 같은 것도 더 적극적으로 해서 이제 더 많은 사람을 만나보고 싶어요.
네, 저는 이제 대학에 들어가는데 그래도 빨리 더 코로나가 없어져서 다들 마스크 벗고 재밌게 보낼 수 있었으면 좋겠습니다.
I think I would pass my exams to the university.
Yeah, for me to finish the Korean course because we're studying at Seoul National University, so we want to finish all the courses there.
I haven't been home in like 4 years, so hopefully I want to visit my hometown. I'm currently in the process of changing my visa, so that too. And, the usual health and all that stuff.
Happy New Year!
Happy New Year!